Did you know that Carl Jung, one of the most profound thinkers of the modern era, wrote every night as if it were his last day on earth? He did not do this out of drama or fear, but because he had discovered something most of us never truly grasp. Living each day as if it were your last does not mean what you think it means. For years, I believed that phrase was just cheap motivation. The kind of advice that pushes you to spend all your savings on a trip or to quit your job in pursuit of impossible dreams. But I was completely wrong. The truth is much deeper and far more transformative. When you truly understand what it means to live each day as if it were your last, you don't drastically change your external life. You change something far more essential. You change the way you experience each moment you already have, and that shifts everything, absolutely everything. Today, we will uncover what truly happens in your mind, in your relationships, and in your perception of reality when you apply this wisdom in the right way. Here's the warning. Nothing you think you know about this idea is accurate. The first illusion we've swallowed is that living each day as your last means doing extraordinary things every single day, climbing mountains, traveling the world, confessing your love to someone, abandoning everything for your dreams. But look at your own experience. How many times have you tried to live that way? And how long did that intensity last? Exactly. A few days, maybe weeks, before reality struck and you had to return to paying bills, fulfilling responsibilities, and facing the consequences of impulsive choices. Jung understood this clearly. He was not in a position to abandon his calling to chase fleeting adventures. He had responsibilities, profound inner research, patience to guide, and truths to uncover about the psyche that would affect generations. Yet something in him shifted radically when he began to practice this philosophy. His writings reveal a transformation not connected to dramatic external changes, but to something far subtler and more powerful. The shift occurred in the quality of his attention. This is what truly happens when you live each day as if it were the last, and why it is more revolutionary than any external change you could imagine. Because most of us live like emotional sleepwalkers, disconnected from the present, lost in automatisms that keep us away from the life unfolding right in front of us. Imagine if today were truly your last day on earth, not because of illness or tragedy, but simply as a mental exercise. What would change in the next 10 minutes of your life? I am not talking about grand gestures or dramatic choices. I mean right now, in this precise moment, as you are hearing these words. If you knew this was your last day, would it change the way you are paying attention to these ideas? Would it change the intensity with which you are processing this information? Of course it would. And here lies the first revelation. Most of the time, we live with scattered attention, divided between regrets of the past and anxieties about the future. Our minds operate on autopilot, processing information superficially, moving through life as if we were guaranteed another 50 years of existence. But when you activate definitive awareness, when you integrate the fact that this day, this hour, this moment could be the last, something fundamental shifts within your nervous system. Your attention sharpens like a laser. Your perception heightens. Colors appear more vivid, sounds clearer, sensations more intense. This is not mysticism. It is psychology and neurobiology. When the mind detects existential urgency, it deactivates the filters that normally dull perception in order to conserve energy. Suddenly, you are fully awake. Jung described this as awakening from the dream of ordinary life, and he did not use this practice occasionally, but as a daily discipline. Each night, before sleeping, he would review the day as if it had been his last, not to punish himself for mistakes or drown in regrets, but to extract every drop of meaning from the hours he had lived, to fully honor the gift of consciousness granted to him for those 24 hours. The result was a man who experienced profound gratitude for the simplest aspects of existence: the taste of food, the warmth of the sun on his skin, the richness of a conversation, even the melancholy beauty of watching the seasons change. But there is something deeper here, something beyond aesthetic appreciation of life. This is where most interpretations fall short. They believe living each day as if it were your last is about maximizing pleasure or minimizing regret. But the truth is more complex and, paradoxically, more liberating. When you truly internalize the temporality of existence, when you stop pretending you will live forever, something extraordinary happens in your relationship with suffering. Most of our psychological pain comes from resisting the temporal nature of life. We cling to moments already gone. We worry about futures that may never arrive. We fight against the natural flow of change and loss that defines the human experience. But when you live each day as if it were your last, you develop what Jung called amor fati, love of fate, love of what is, including the difficult, the painful, the uncomfortable dimensions of human existence. This is not passive resignation. It is something far more powerful: the deep understanding that every moment of consciousness, even moments of pain, are infinitely precious precisely because they are temporary. Think of it this way: if you had unlimited access to something, would you value it as much as if it were scarce and finite? Of course not. Value is directly tied to rarity, and your life, your awareness, your capacity to experience this specific moment are the rarest things you will ever have. This realization creates a radical shift in how you face everyday difficulties. That frustrating argument with your partner, that stressful project at work, that financial worry keeping you awake. When you experience them from the perspective of finitude, everything changes. Not because the problems vanish, but because your relationship with them is transformed. You see them as an integral part of the complete human experience you have the privilege of living, temporary ingredients in the complex recipe of your existence. And here is the most beautiful paradox. When you stop resisting the temporality of life, when you fully embrace the fact that all of this is fleeting, you experience a peace that is impossible to attain while fighting against the transient nature of being. But there is an even deeper dimension that few people ever explore, a dimension that concerns not only your internal experience, but also your relationships with others. Take a moment to reflect on your relationship with impermanence. How many times have you clung to something you knew was temporary? Here is what no one tells you. Living each day as if it were your last radically transforms the way you love the people in your life. Most of our relationships are poisoned by the illusion of permanence. We take for granted that the important people in our lives will always be available. We postpone meaningful conversations. We assume there will be unlimited time to resolve conflicts, to express gratitude, to deepen connections. But when you truly integrate finitude, not just your own, but also that of those you love, something beautiful and heartbreaking happens simultaneously. Every conversation with your mother becomes potentially the last. Every embrace with your child could be the final one. Every moment with your partner acquires an existential weight that is both terrifying and profoundly liberating. Jung himself lived this truth deeply when unexpected losses touched his life, transforming the way he related to his family, his friends, and even his critics. He didn't become morbid or melancholic. On the contrary, he became more present, more attentive, more authentic in every interaction. Because Carl Jung had come to a visceral understanding that each moment of genuine human connection is a temporary miracle that deserves full attention and gratitude. This generates immediate practical changes. You stop postponing difficult but necessary conversations. You express love and appreciation more often without waiting for special occasions. You forgive more quickly because you realize that clinging to resentment is a luxury you cannot afford when time is limited. Yet something deeper happens. When you truly embrace the temporality of your relationships, you paradoxically experience a purer love, less possessive, less dependent. Because when you know that nothing is permanent, you stop trying to control or own the people you love. You love them for who they are in this moment, without projecting expectations of who they should become. You appreciate them as temporary gifts in your life, not as permanent possessions. And that way of loving is infinitely more fulfilling both for you and for them. But here comes the most radical transformation of all, one that affects not only how you experience life and relationships, but how you make fundamental decisions about your existence. When you live each day as if it were the last, you develop a brutal clarity about what truly matters, and that clarity removes 90% of the doubts, worries, and dilemmas that normally consume your mental energy. Now the crucial question: how can this be applied in real life without falling into destructive or unsustainable extremes? Jung suggested what could be seen as rituals of finitude, specific practices that integrated this awareness into daily routine, without disrupting one's roles as a thinker, father, or contributor to society. The first was what he described as the nightly review. Each evening before sleep, he dedicated a few minutes to reviewing the entire day as if it had been the last, not to criticize or regret, but to fully extract the value of every lived experience. He asked himself, if this had been my last day on earth, how would I evaluate the way I spent these precious hours? Which moments did I meet with full attention? Which did I live on autopilot? This practice produced two powerful effects. First, it increased his capacity to be present the following day, because he had cultivated the habit of consciously valuing each experience. Second, it gave him extraordinary clarity about how he wanted to invest his time and energy. The second ritual was the morning contemplation of mortality. Upon awakening, before beginning the day's activities, he spent a few moments remembering the fragile temporality of existence, not morbidly, but as recognition of the precious opportunity each new day represents. This immediately activated his awareness and helped him prioritize what truly mattered over the superficial urgencies that inevitably appear during the day. The third element was what could be called pauses of finitude scattered throughout the day. In random moments, while eating, walking through the garden, listening to a student, he reminded himself internally, this moment is unique and unrepeatable. I will never again experience exactly this configuration of consciousness, sensations, and circumstances. This simple yet powerful practice transformed ordinary experiences into moments of deep appreciation and presence. But perhaps the most practical application was his approach to decision-making. When faced with complex dilemmas, professional, personal, or ethical, he asked, "If this were my last year of life, what decision would I make? What legacy do I want to leave? What version of myself do I want to be remembered for?" This perspective eliminated trivial considerations and provided a clear moral compass to navigate complicated situations. And here lies the most important point. None of these practices required dramatic changes in external life. He continued fulfilling his responsibilities, honoring his family, and contributing actively to the world. The transformation was internal, yet its effects were profoundly practical. The results of these practices are fascinating and entirely counterintuitive to what most would expect. Instead of becoming reckless or hedonistic, he became more disciplined and focused. Instead of abandoning long-term responsibilities, he embraced them with greater purpose and clarity. Instead of becoming anxious about mortality, he developed a profound serenity that impressed those around him. His reflections reveal a man who had attained something extraordinary: the ability to experience genuine gratitude for existence while maintaining complete equanimity about its end. He described this state as living as if you were to die tomorrow, but planning as if you were to live forever. An apparent contradiction that in truth represents the perfect synthesis between conscious presence and practical responsibility. How did this manifest in his daily experience? His writings give us clear clues. He reported an enhanced ability to find beauty in simple experiences that once went unnoticed. The complex taste of wine during dinner, the distinct texture of the breeze in different seasons, the unique expression on his child's face during a particular conversation. But even more importantly, he described a completely new way of experiencing time. Moments of true presence expanded subjectively, while hours spent in worry or distraction seemed to contract until they disappeared. This alteration of temporal perception generated a paradoxical sensation. Although he was more aware than ever of life's brevity, he experienced each day as richer, fuller, and more satisfying than before adopting these practices. He also reported significant changes in his relationships. His friends noticed he had become more present in conversations, less distracted by external worries, more generous with his attention and appreciation. But perhaps the most remarkable change was his relationship with fear. He had not eliminated fear. That would have been impossible and even counterproductive. But he had fundamentally transformed his relationship with uncertainty and potential loss. Instead of wasting energy trying to control uncertain outcomes, he learned to find peace in accepting the unpredictable nature of existence. Instead of resisting inevitable change, he developed the capacity to flow with life's natural transformations. His later reflections, written during the most turbulent periods of his personal and intellectual life, reveal a man at peace with himself and with his destiny, not out of resignation, but out of a profound understanding that he had lived each available day with the highest possible awareness. Consider how your life would unfold if you could maintain this perspective consistently. We have traveled a path that began with a misunderstood concept and ended with wisdom capable of fundamentally transforming the experience of being alive. The truth is that living each day as if it were the last has nothing to do with dramatic external changes, impulsive decisions, or irresponsible hedonism. It has to do with something far deeper and more powerful: the transformation of everyday consciousness. When you genuinely integrate the temporality of existence, when you stop pretending you will live forever, you encounter a form of presence and gratitude impossible to reach in any other way. Your relationships deepen because every shared moment takes on an existential value. Your decisions become clearer because you now hold an unmistakable moral compass. What would you choose if time were limited? Your ability to find beauty and meaning in ordinary life expands exponentially. But perhaps the most beautiful truth is that this philosophy does not require abandoning responsibilities or forsaking long-term plans. It requires only one thing: to live with the full awareness that every breath, every glance, every instant is both fragile and infinite. On the contrary, it allows you to embrace them with deeper purpose and with a mind less consumed by fear or anxiety. When you begin to truly realize that every single day is a gift that will never return, you naturally approach life with a different energy. The focus is no longer on fulfilling obligations, chasing after approval, or living under the weight of pressure. Instead, it becomes about embodying the fullest awareness possible and allowing authenticity to flow through you. Not because you are forced to, but because you fall in love with the very act of being alive, awake, and conscious within the vast mystery of existence. Each sunrise stops being just another morning. It turns into a sacred reminder that you have been given yet another chance to live, to feel, to transform. Carl Jung understood this truth not as an abstract idea, but as a living experience that shaped the way he moved through the world. His life was not free from suffering. He faced tragedies, deep internal conflicts, and the constant confrontation with his own unconscious shadows. And yet, he showed us something profound, that even in the presence of pain and uncertainty, it is possible to meet life with serenity, presence, and gratitude. Jung did not leave behind a legacy measured by wealth or possessions. What remains from him is not the authority he held in the academic world, but the living demonstration that a human being can learn to walk through existence with equanimity, with open eyes, and with a heart capable of embracing both the darkness and the light. This is why his vision continues to resonate today. It whispers to us that wholeness is not found by avoiding suffering, nor by clinging desperately to permanence. It is discovered when we stop running away from the fleeting nature of our lives and instead learn to walk alongside it, letting the awareness of impermanence make every moment shine with greater brilliance. Imagine for a moment how different your days would look if you fully accepted that nothing here lasts forever. Every conversation, every embrace, every breath would take on a new depth, because you would understand that it will never be repeated in the same way again. So the real question is simple, yet it cuts straight to the essence of our being. Are you ready to awaken from the dream of permanence? Are you willing to recognize yourself as the temporary, fragile, and infinitely precious being that you are? Because the moment you do, you begin to live differently. You stop waiting for some future event to justify your happiness, and you start discovering beauty in the ordinary rhythm of everyday life. A walk under the rain, a moment of silence with yourself, or even the most routine task suddenly becomes a doorway to presence. And when you allow this shift to happen, you realize that there is enough meaning hidden in a single day to fill an entire lifetime. The extraordinary is not out there in some distant future. It is right here, in this very moment, if you have the courage to truly see it. To live this way is not to escape suffering or deny the challenges of being human, but to integrate them into the flow of existence, transforming them into opportunities for growth and deeper awareness. So I invite you to reflect on this. When in your life did you feel, perhaps with startling clarity, the fragile yet sacred nature of existence? Was it in a moment of loss, in an encounter with beauty, or in the stillness of solitude? And how did that realization change the way you understood what really matters? Share that memory, because in speaking about it, you not only honor your own awakening, but also offer light to others who are searching for meaning in their own journey. There is a man, 63 years old, sitting quietly on a wooden bench in a park in the city of Zik. The air is heavy with the scent of autumn, and the trees release their leaves one by one, as if nature itself were engaged in a slow ritual of letting go. He watches them fall, drifting gently, carried by the breeze until they finally touch the ground. His gaze follows their movement, but his mind is not wandering to the world of obligations or responsibilities. He is not thinking about the work he has left unfinished, the letters he never answered, or the projects that lie waiting on his desk. Not even the question of what he will eat for dinner that evening crosses his mind. For the first time in decades, he is completely, almost shockingly, present. That man is Carl Jung, and in that precise moment, he discovered something that would forever change his understanding of what it truly means to live fully. The revelation that came to him on that autumn day in 1938 may sound unsettling to anyone who feels trapped in the rhythm of modern life. Jung realized that he had spent most of his adult years unable to genuinely experience the present moment. Despite being considered one of the brightest minds of his generation, a pioneering psychologist whose theories reshaped the way we think about the human psyche, he himself had been psychologically absent from the very life he was living. But what disturbed him most was not his personal struggle. It was the recognition that this absence from the present was not an individual flaw, but rather the inevitable outcome of a process that touches every human being as they mature. Jung understood that this was not just about him, it was about all of us, and what he uncovered afterward was not only profound, but also a secret that remains hidden from most adults even today, a secret that has the power to transform how we relate to every passing moment of our lives. His observation revealed a paradox in human experience that still unsettles us. The more wisdom we gather, the further we seem to drift away from our natural ability to be fully present. Children, Jung noticed, possess something that adults lose, and then spend years trying to recover through therapy, meditation, or spiritual practice. They live entirely in the immediacy of experience. They taste without comparing, they play without anticipating, they feel without explaining. How could it be, Jung wondered, that by gaining experience, we lose the most fundamental skill of all, the ability to enjoy life as it is happening? He concluded that during the process of maturation, we develop what he called the projective mind. This psychological function constantly pulls us forward into the future, or traps us in memories of the past. It is not a defect. In fact, it is precisely this capacity that enables us to plan, to build civilizations, to learn from mistakes, to imagine possibilities. It is the very foundation of our progress as human beings. But the problem emerges when this useful function becomes the only way we know how to exist. Reflect on your own daily experience. How many moments pass in which your mind is fully absorbed in the present, uncolored by anticipation or memory? When was the last time you ate a meal without thinking of something else, without scrolling through your phone, without remembering yesterday's conversation, without worrying about tomorrow's meeting. When was the last time you walked simply to feel the rhythm of your steps, or spoke to someone without secretly preparing your next reply? For most of us, this direct contact with what Jung called the eternal moment has been almost entirely lost. It is a state of consciousness in which time itself seems to pause, where experience feels whole, satisfying, and alive. Jung was not content with merely diagnosing the problem. For the last 20 years of his life, he devoted himself to finding a way back, to developing a method for recovering the lost ability to dwell fully in the present. And the path began with a simple but piercing observation. The people who had lived the longest, who had accumulated the most wisdom, were often the least capable of feeling immediate satisfaction. Something in the very act of growing older seemed to rob them of their joy. In his therapy sessions, he began to notice a striking pattern. Younger patients came to him with concrete problems, conflicts with colleagues, difficult decisions, complicated romances. Their concerns were immediate, pressing, often urgent. But his older patients, those in middle age and beyond, came with something else entirely, a haunting sense of emptiness, a feeling that life was slipping through their fingers, that no matter what they achieved or acquired, they could not be fully satisfied with the present. One woman of 52 years told him, "It is as if I live constantly in between what has already happened and what is still to come. The present feels like a waiting room where the train I need to board never arrives." Her metaphor captured perfectly what Jung himself had been sensing. As we age, our relationship with time becomes distorted. We stop inhabiting moments directly, and instead, we live in interpretations of them. Jung identified 3 specific psychological mechanisms at work in the mature mind. The first he called the comparative archive. Each new experience is instantly filtered through the memory of past experiences. Instead of living it freshly, we categorize it, we compare it, we evaluate it according to what we already know. The second is the future project. Rather than experiencing things for what they are, we experience them as steps within a sequence leading towards some future goal. Even pleasures become instrumental. A walk becomes exercise, a meal becomes fuel, a conversation becomes networking. The moment itself vanishes in the shadow of what it leads to. The third mechanism he named interpretive vigilance. It is the voice in our heads that narrates, analyzes, contextualizes everything as it happens. It keeps us safe, yes, but it also blocks us from immersion. Instead of tasting the apple, we describe the apple to ourselves. Instead of being in love, we analyze whether we are in love. Together, these mechanisms create what Jung called the temporal cage of adult consciousness. We live displaced from our own present, always standing slightly outside of life. But Jung realized something even more disturbing. This displacement does not simply rob us of enjoyment. It distorts our entire perception of reality. We are no longer living life itself, but a version of life that has been filtered, processed, and projected. Think of how often this has already happened to you. His most revolutionary realization came when he saw that what we often call wisdom may actually be the very thing preventing us from living fully. We assume that accumulated experience improves the quality of life. But Jung observed the opposite. His most knowledgeable patients, those with decades of achievement, profound understanding, and refined analysis, were often the least able to feel genuine wonder. One successful man in his 60s could explain in great detail why a sunset was beautiful. the science of light, the physics of color, the psychology of perception, but he had lost the capacity to be moved by it. As Jung wrote in his private journals, experience can become a more sophisticated prison than ignorance. This led him to investigate what he later called the tyranny of previous experience. He discovered that the mature mind builds automatic patterns that act as filters between us and reality. We live through what he called second-hand experiences. When you meet someone new, do you really meet them, or do you unconsciously place them into categories shaped by others you have known before? When you taste new food, do you savor it, or do you compare it to past meals? The deepest consequences of this problem appear in our closest relationships. Jung noticed that people with the most relational experience often had the most superficial relationships. They had developed such refined patterns of interpretation and prediction that they no longer truly met the people around them. One patient confessed, "My wife has become a set of patterns I recognize rather than a person I discover anew each day." And this dynamic extends inward, into the relationship we have with ourselves. Mature self-awareness, while valuable for growth, can also become a barrier. We turn into spectators of our own lives rather than participants. We analyze our feelings instead of feeling them. We watch ourselves thinking, but we forget to simply live. Jung realized that maturity carries a hidden cost. We gain analysis, prediction, and control, but we lose awe, spontaneity, and presence. The challenge, he concluded, was not to return to the innocence of childhood, but to integrate accumulated wisdom with the ability to live directly in the now. His moment of greatest clarity arrived during what he later called the stone experiment. For months, he spent his afternoons stacking stones on his property, building a small tower without any specific purpose. He worked with his hands, arranging and balancing each rock, driven not by goals, but by the sheer pleasure of the process. One afternoon, as he placed one stone carefully upon another, he realized that for the first time in years, his mind was empty. He was not planning, not remembering, not narrating. He was simply feeling the weight of the stone, the roughness of its texture, the balance of the moment. It was like waking from a long dream, he wrote. I realized I had been living in my head for decades, while real life was happening in my hands, in my body, in the immediacy of the moment. This experience led him to a completely new understanding. The secret to truly enjoying every moment after maturity does not lie in silencing the weight of our accumulated experience, but rather in learning to inhabit it differently. Jung discovered that there is a particular form of awareness that allows us to integrate the wisdom of the past with the immediacy of the present. He called it integrated awareness, a state where the experienced mind does not dominate the moment, but enriches it without overwhelming it. The key is to recognize that we have two fundamentally different ways of knowing: cumulative knowledge and present knowledge. Cumulative knowledge is built through experiences, patterns, comparisons, and predictions. Present knowledge emerges when we encounter what is happening directly, right now. Most adults, after years of growth, have developed their cumulative knowledge so strongly that their ability to be present has weakened. But Jung found that it is possible to cultivate both simultaneously, without one suppressing the other. His deepest revelation was this: accumulated experience does not have to become a barrier to the present. Instead, it can act as a lens that enriches immediate experience without distorting it. Imagine the difference between looking at a sunset through a microscope and looking at it with eyes that have witnessed thousands of sunsets yet still retain the capacity for wonder. The microscope distorts. Experienced yet present eyes enrich the vision without stealing its immediacy. Jung even developed specific practices to cultivate this integrated awareness. He noticed that whenever he activated this state, every moment naturally felt more fulfilling. Not because he ignored his past experiences, but because he had learned to hold them in a way that served the present rather than suffocated it. For him, a wise adult was not someone who had accumulated more experiences, but someone who had learned to carry them without losing the ability to keep experiencing. He went beyond theory and created a practical method that he called the protocol of integrated presence. This method began with the recognition that one cannot simply decide to be present. Specific conditions must be created for integrated awareness to arise. The first phase was recognition of patterns. For 1 week, he suggested observing when the mind automatically categorized, compared, or projected during daily experiences. The goal was not to change anything, but to build awareness of how often the mind leaned on automatic processes. The practice was simple: to internally note, "Now I am comparing," or "Now I am projecting," or "Now I am interpreting." It was not about judgment, but awareness. The second phase was sensory anchors. Jung described them as points of sensory return, elements of immediate experience that could be used as anchors to return to presence. This could be the feeling of air on the skin, the weight of the body against a chair, or the rhythm of breathing. The anchors had to be simple, always available, and requiring direct attention rather than interpretation. Whenever the mind slipped into automatic patterns, one could return to these anchors gently. The third phase was conscious integration. Instead of trying to suppress accumulated knowledge, the task was to hold it more flexibly. When a comparison or interpretation arose, it was to be kept in the background while maintaining primary attention on the immediate experience. Jung compared it to listening to music while having a conversation. The music enriches the atmosphere without dominating attention. Likewise, accumulated experience could enrich the present without overpowering it. The fourth phase was the practice of complete moments. Jung encouraged simple exercises: drinking a cup of coffee, walking to the corner, or listening to a song all the way through. In these activities, the challenge was to let accumulated experience serve the moment instead of dominating it. The aim was not to force presence, but to practice letting the present be informed, not imprisoned, by the past. Jung also acknowledged the real challenges of this process. Decades of automatic patterns do not transform easily. He expected resistance, frustration, and even moments when the method seemed to fail. But he saw these difficulties as part of the process, not as signs of failure. With time, persistence, and patience, he discovered that this approach did more than bring presence. It fundamentally transformed the quality of everyday life. Before practicing integrated awareness, Jung described his existence as living in delay, constantly in the interval between experiences. Conversations became rehearsals for future ones. Meals turned into fuel for what came next. Even pleasures were filtered through the thought, "This should make me happy," or "I must remember this later." Life had become a series of stored experiences rather than lived ones. He realized he had been a librarian of his own life, cataloging, referencing, and organizing, but rarely reading the book itself. After months of practice, he began to experience what he called moments of complete reality, instances where accumulated experience enriched the present without suffocating it. A conversation with a friend was fulfilling in itself, not just a bridge to something else. A meal became a genuine encounter with flavors and textures shaped by his past, but not imprisoned by it. He wrote in his diary, "It is as if I had been living in a translation of my life, and now I have finally found the original text." The most remarkable part of this transformation was that he did not lose his ability to plan, analyze, or learn from past experience. Instead, these became conscious tools rather than automatic reflexes that ruled over him. He noticed that his relationship with time itself had changed. Moments no longer felt scarce or fleeting. When he was present, each moment carried a fullness that made time feel abundant instead of limited. Paradoxically, he wrote, "When I stopped trying to capture time, I discovered that I had all the time in the world." The impact on his relationships was profound. By learning to hold his accumulated relational experiences without letting them dominate, he rediscovered the people around him. His wife, colleagues, and even acquaintances became less predictable, more alive, and more surprising. His wife once remarked, "It feels like you are seeing me for the first time in years, even though you know me better than ever." People noticed the difference, and so did he. Jung spent the final 20 years of his life refining and sharing this discovery. What began as a personal realization about the loss of presence evolved into a deep insight into the nature of mature consciousness. His conclusion was both simple and profound. Maturity does not mean losing immediacy. We can be both wise and innocent, experienced yet open to wonder, knowledgeable and still discovering. The secret he discovered that day in the park was not a complicated technique or elaborate philosophy, but a fundamental understanding of how to carry accumulated experience, not as a prison separating us from life, but as a tool that enriches each moment without taking it over. In his final notes, Jung wrote, "The art of living after maturity consists in learning to be both the most experienced student and the most authentic beginner in every moment of our existence." This transformation does not happen automatically with age. It requires conscious practice, patience with ourselves, and the willingness to question mental habits we have developed over decades. But the reward, the recovery of our natural capacity to enjoy each moment, is worth every effort. True wisdom, Jung believed, is not about gathering more experiences, but about learning to carry the ones we already have in a way that serves life rather than limits it. And if this discovery resonates with you, if you recognize that subtle but persistent disconnection from the present in your own life, perhaps this is the moment to begin your own experiment with integrated awareness. You do not need to retreat to a distant place or wait for a perfect setting. You can begin right now with the very next moment you live, practicing how to let your accumulated experience enrich the present without dominating it. Now tell me, in which moments of your own life have you most clearly noticed the tension between accumulated experience and the capacity to fully enjoy the present? If this video has stirred something deep within you, if you have felt that unsettling recognition that always comes when truth strikes the core of your being, then you are ready to take the next step on this journey toward individuation. What you have felt is not random. It is the call of your own soul, reminding you that the time has come to awaken to who you truly are. This space is not about easy answers or superficial promises. It is about the raw and authentic process of transformation. Every week, we open a door into the hidden depths of the human psyche, into the places where light and shadow meet, and where your true power is waiting to be remembered. Here, you will not find shallow, self-help formulas that promise quick results, but the alchemical gold of real inner change. Because in a world where so many hide behind masks, only the one who dares to see their true face becomes sovereign over their own destiny. To walk this path is to face yourself without excuses, to embrace your shadow, and to integrate every fragment of who you are. It is not the easy road, but it is the only one that leads to wholeness. So, if you feel the call, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, activate the notification bell, and allow these teachings to be a steady companion on your path. Share this wisdom with those who are brave enough to confront their own darkness, because only the courageous can uncover the light hidden behind it. The truth has always been waiting for you, but only you can decide whether you are worthy of it. And remember, the one who dares to look into the abyss of their own soul will discover that the abyss was never emptiness, but the mirror of their true self. Have you ever asked yourself how many decisions in your life were truly your own? How many times did you feel in control when in reality you were merely reacting? And what if I told you that what you call kindness or empathy might actually be the very force keeping you in captivity? The one who seeks to dominate others may appear powerful, but the one who has mastered themselves is truly invincible. The wise one, the one who governs their own spirit, is stronger than one who takes a city. This echoes the wisdom found in Proverbs, and it is Carl Jung who warns us with calm precision that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. All of us, at some point, have been hostages to our own emotions. You've cried over someone who never deserved a single tear. Have you ever felt guilty for saying no, even when you knew it was the right thing to do? How many times were you manipulated without even realizing it, just because your compassion outweighed your discernment? We live in an age where chains are no longer made of iron. They're invisible. They're made of guilt, fear, and unspoken expectations. Those who wish to control you today do not raise their voices. They whisper, they weep, they make you feel guilty for choosing your freedom. They don't want you to think. They want you to feel. Because the more you feel, the less you think. And the less you think, the more likely you are to betray yourself. Here, we will explore Jung's ideas, not as a doctrine of cruelty, but as a mirror reflecting human reality. We will descend into the underground of human behavior, where tears become traps and embraces may conceal silent strangulation. And no, this is not about becoming stone. It's about refusing to be a puppet. It's about discovering the precise point between emotion and reason. It's about becoming the master of your own psyche. If you're tired of being drained, manipulated, and consumed by those who turn their wounds into weapons and their lack into strategy, stay with us. We are going to dive into the depths of the unconscious, where Jung whispers, "Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals." You're about to discover that the path to mastery may require not feeling everything, but understanding everything. If you're ready, take a deep breath. Let's begin. Have you ever felt that feeling deeply is both your greatest strength and your greatest downfall? Since childhood, we've been taught that crying is a sign of humanity, that forgiveness is noble, that to feel deeply is to be good. But what if that was a trap? A golden cage where the more you feel, the more you bleed. Society dressed emotion in garments of virtue. But Jung, with his penetrating gaze and surgical insight, reminds us that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Those who feel too much are often the first to be deceived. Why? Because the one who feels hesitates, and the one who hesitates loses. What no one tells you is that emotion, as beautiful as it may be, can also be used as an instrument of domination. Like wine poured by manipulative hands, it intoxicates, warms, and then binds. How many times have you said yes when every part of you wanted to scream no? How many times did you stay, even when your soul was begging to leave, because the other person cried, shook, or begged? The brutal truth is that excess empathy can become submission. It's not that feeling is wrong. It's that feeling without boundaries, without discernment, is dangerous. It's like lighting a candle in the middle of a storm. It may shine for a moment, but it is easily extinguished. And the world is full of storms, full of people who blow in your direction not to warm you, but to snuff out your light. In some silent hour of the night, alone with your thoughts, have you realized that you carry pain that doesn't even belong to you? Inherited guilt, imposed responsibilities, expectations you were never meant to fulfill. You feel for everyone, but no one seems to feel for you. You carry the weight of a world that doesn't even notice your shoulders. That is not kindness. That is emotional servitude. Jung reminds us that reason becomes unproductive when it is not rooted in the totality of the psyche, and those who reject it cannot be swayed by it. You don't awaken the unconscious in others through empathy. You simply feed their defense mechanisms. Uncontrolled emotion is not a virtue. It is exposure, and the one who lives with their heart too open becomes an easy map for those who seek to exploit it. Love without discernment, forgiveness without reflection, compassion without boundaries. It all sounds beautiful in inspirational quotes, but in practice, it destroys. This is not about turning into stone. It's about recognizing that even gold must be protected. You are far too valuable to be so accessible. Your emotional energy is a finite resource, and like all finite things, it must be managed with intention and strategy. This is where true self-knowledge begins, when you realize that you don't need to react to everything you feel. You can feel, and yet remain still. You can understand, and still choose not to accept. You can listen to someone's pain, and still prioritize your own peace. Detachment, not as coldness, but as conscious self-mastery. It's the ability to become the author of your emotional narrative, rather than the character others attempt to write against your will. And perhaps, just perhaps, true freedom begins right here, in the moment you stop trying to rescue everyone and start liberating yourself from yourself. They don't need to raise a hand to wound you. They don't need to shout to dominate you. All they need is for you to feel. The more you feel, the more predictable you become. And if you are predictable, you are controllable. Carl Jung understood this long before modern psychology could fully articulate it. For Jung, true power lies in the relationship between the unconscious and the self, not in domination, but in awareness. And awareness reveals this: human beings act from emotion before reason, and those who understand this govern. Today, the throne is no longer found in castles. It resides in relationships, in social media, in the silent games of emotional influence. Emotional blackmail is now mistaken for affection. Victimhood disguises itself as vulnerability. And the manipulator, he doesn't arrive as the villain. He cries before he strikes. We live in an era where tears wield more power than logic, because emotion shortens the path to the heart and derails the mind. You no longer need to be right. It's enough to appear wounded, and the emotional court of public opinion will absolve or condemn you on that alone. Have you noticed how someone suddenly changes when confronted? First, they play the offended, then the misunderstood, then they say, "After all I did for you." That's not remorse. That's control. This is not about who's right. It's about who holds the narrative. And in this invisible theater, emotion becomes the script that intoxicates, confuses, and disarms. You find yourself explaining things you didn't do, apologizing for things you don't even understand, defending truths that should never have been questioned. That is the goal. To take away your clarity so that, lost in the fog, you rely on them. They sow confusion and offer themselves as the compass. Jung once warned that what remains unconscious in you will appear in your life as fate. And here it is, the unresolved wounds, the shadow in disguise, seeking power over you. But there's another kind of danger, not the one who suffers in silence, but the one who pretends to suffer to avoid accountability. These are not victims, they are actors, turning your empathy into a tool of control. This is where the idea of emotional sovereignty emerges. It's not about being indifferent to the world, but about recognizing that to survive it, you cannot hand over the steering wheel of your psyche to those who only want to drive you into ruin. Every time you hesitate out of pity, every time you back down to avoid seeming harsh, every time you silence your truth to avoid conflict, you lose ground. You surrender emotional territory, and those who conquer it rarely return it. You must understand, emotional silence is not the absence of feeling. It is strategy. It's the sword of the inner warrior who, instead of striking, observes, and when necessary, steps back, but never surrenders. Because in the end, this silent war is not won by shouting. It is won with presence, with resolve, with the kind of coldness that doesn't come from a lack of love, but from lucidity, the kind Jung would respect, not because it dominates, but because it is self-governing. Jung never advocated cruelty. He didn't glorify detachment for its own sake, but as a path toward inner clarity. In a world where every emotional gesture is a map of your psyche, silence becomes camouflage, and detachment, a subtle form of freedom. When Jung spoke of individuation, he wasn't promoting isolation. He was describing the sacred process of becoming whole, free from the projections and expectations of others. That often misunderstood phrase, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both," was never a celebration of fear. It was a warning against emotional dependency as a foundation for authority. It wasn't about dehumanization. It was a raw dissection of power. And Jung would have likely agreed. The one who governs their inner world, who embraces their shadow, who knows the silence within, cannot be ruled by noise from the outside. When power rests in affection, it dissolves with the fluctuation of feelings. The detachment Carl Jung suggests is not emptiness. It is the ability to govern your impulses before they govern you. It's seeing someone's tears and asking, "Is this genuine pain or a strategic mask?" It's walking among emotions, yet remaining centered within the self. And here lies the most delicate point. Being emotionally strategic does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming fair to yourself. It means not punishing yourself with promises made in the heat of emotion. It's realizing that the yes you say to please others is often a disguised no toward your own truth. Have you noticed how those without boundaries are always more exhausted? How those who feel too much are often caught in the middle of dramas they didn't start? In this sense, detachment is not a withdrawal from empathy, but the maturity to choose when and where to invest your emotional energy. Think about it. Would you let anyone drive your car at full speed through mountain curves while you sleep in the back seat? Of course not. Yet every day, you allow others to steer your emotions, and with them, your decisions. Jung, although misunderstood at times, was a profound observer of the human psyche. He didn't ask us to be indifferent. He asked us to be aware. And awareness requires distance, not cold, inhuman distance, but the distance necessary to perceive the whole. Not just the emotional theater unfolding before you. You don't have to be a stone, but you also don't have to be a sponge. And this brings us to a deep psychological concept, aligned with Jung and Stoic thought: equanimity, the peace of the soul that arises when you stop reacting to what you cannot control. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgment about them." And if you learn to discern between authentic emotion and emotional manipulation, you'll be on the path to true inner sovereignty. Detachment, then, is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of awareness. It's not allowing someone else's tears to dictate your ethics. It's saying no without hatred, yes without guilt, goodbye without drama. Because those who can't let go will always be dragged along. And as Jung might say, those who gain favor from others must not depend on it, for what is given by the collective can be taken away. But when the oppressor is your own emotion, then true self-mastery is born, not in contempt for others, but in unwavering respect for yourself. And that respect, that center, that coldness that does not kill but protects, is the rarest form of freedom. Becoming unshakable doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you learn to feel without drowning. It's like diving into the ocean and knowing how to swim instead of sinking every time an emotional wave rises. In today's world, true weakness isn't in feeling nothing. It's in being ruled by every feeling. Do you remember how many times your peace was shattered by an unanswered message, a calculated silence, a glance that implied guilt? These small moments are actually hooks thrown by those who know that human emotion, especially guilt and the need to be accepted, are the easiest buttons to push. You must understand this. There are people who feed off your imbalance. They thrive on your need to explain, to be understood, to be liked. Every time you justify your absence, your decision, your boundary, you open a door, and when they enter, they don't knock. They invade, rearrange your inner space, and worse, make you feel guilty for wanting to reclaim it. But there's a secret, one that almost no one teaches. You can feel and not respond. You can listen and not absorb. You can witness another's pain and still not sacrifice yourself. That's not coldness. It's wisdom. It's the difference between being a conscious individual and being part of a manipulated crowd. That's the key. You are not what you feel. You are what you choose to do with what you feel. Once you understand that, everything changes. You begin to see the invisible game. Every accusation, every silence, every crisis becomes a piece on the board. And on that board, the king is the one who remains still while everything else trembles. To be emotionally unshakable means this: to remain whole in the middle of the war, to not react impulsively, to respond with clarity, and perhaps more than anything, it means understanding that you no longer need to prove anything. You don't need to justify your no. You don't need to explain your distance. You are not open code. You are sacred territory, and access to that territory must be earned, not demanded. Carl Jung didn't want you to stop feeling. He wanted you to stop being a slave to what you feel. He wanted you to become the master of yourself. And in this digital hysteria, where everyone shouts, where everyone is offended, where everything becomes drama, your calm is a revolution. Your calculated indifference is a shield. Your silence is the new scream of freedom. You may be called insensitive, cold, distant, but what you're really becoming is free. Because being free means no longer living based on other people's emotions. It means not allowing yesterday's tears to determine tomorrow's path. It means understanding that empathy without limits becomes a chain, and that the only way to break free is to stop reacting. You were not born to be manipulated. You were born to be whole. And maybe, in the end, the most honest question you can ask yourself is, how many times did my emotions speak louder and I silence myself? You no longer need to be everyone's hero, not if that means becoming the villain in your own story. Empathy without discernment becomes a trap. Love without wisdom becomes a prison. Guilt planted in your heart becomes a leash. And without realizing it, you end up living a script written by someone who never truly saw you. Jung didn't preach emotional detachment. He preached lucidity, the conscious presence of self. He understood that one who rules their own heart does not surrender to emotional blackmail. They don't lose sleep trying to understand someone who never intended to be understood. They don't carry burdens disguised as cries for help that are actually attempts at control. You have the right to protect your peace as if it were your final frontier, because maybe it is. You have the right to say no without explanation, to close doors without a warning, to love without self-sacrifice. True power doesn't lie in feeling less. It lies in feeling with wisdom, in choosing what deserves your affection and what deserves only silence. And when you realize that you can look into the eyes of someone who used to manipulate you and feel no anger, no fear, no guilt, only a quiet, cold respect from someone who can no longer be touched, you'll understand. That is the beginning of freedom, the birth of the unshakable self, and the end of the old you, the one made of doubt, tears, and self-abandonment. You're not here to please others. You're here to be whole. And sometimes, being whole means feeling nothing, so that you can finally control everything. Let me tell you something I had never said out loud before. This script, this message, was not born from a brilliant idea. It was born from a scar. On a random night, phone in hand, a message appeared on the screen. Words that seemed like affection, but carried hidden venom. I read it, swallowed hard, and for a few seconds I thought of replying, apologizing, even though I had done nothing wrong, even though I knew it was just another emotional rope trying to tighten around my neck. And then I remembered all the times I gave in, all the times I kept quiet just to keep the peace. But it was never my peace. I bent out of fear of seeming cruel. I was kind until I lost myself. That night, there were no screams, no replies, just a quiet awakening. I wasn't wrong to protect my space. It wasn't selfishness. It was survival. It was finally maturity. And maybe you're here for the same reason, because at some point in your life, you felt too much, and you were used for that, because you learned to be silent so as not to lose. But in that silence, you lost yourself. This video is a hug for you, a whisper that reminds you it's okay to set boundaries. Your heart wasn't made to be a showcase for other people's wounds. Your empathy should not be a prison. Now, I want to offer you something that isn't for everyone, but it is for you. You, who made it this far, searching for deeper answers about who you are and where your life is going. I created something that goes beyond a book. I built a map for the soul, a guide that merges science, philosophy, and critical thought, a tool to help you break mental patterns, question your identity, and rebuild yourself from the root. This isn't an e-book of pretty quotes. It's a guide for those who can no longer stand living on autopilot. If you felt something here, it's because something inside you is waking up. And I thank you for letting that truth breathe with you, even just for a moment. Truly, thank you. Hey, you, the one who stayed until the end. Yes, I'm talking to you. If this video stirred something deep inside, don't leave in silence, okay? Like the video, or pretend you liked it. Just help the algorithm. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel, because you know how it goes. You watch, you cry, you reflect, and then you forget where you found it. Turn on the notification bell. Yes, the one you always ignore. It exists for a reason. And leave a comment below. I choose my peace. Let's see how many of us are finally ready to stop bleeding for those who only know how to press the wound. Now look at these two videos on the screen. One of them will show you a part of yourself you're still afraid to face. But that's okay. Click it. It'll be uncomfortable. But there are truths that only grow when we have the courage to face them in the dark. Go on. I'll see you at the next abyss, or the next awakening. Listen carefully. When your energy becomes too strong, you don't scare people. You awaken them. And not everyone wants to wake up. Some react as if you flash sunlight directly into their eyes. They squint. They get defensive. They make jokes that are really shields. Others rush toward you too quickly, like moths hypnotized by a lamp, drawn to warmth they don't yet know how to hold. What happens to you is not random. What happens to them isn't either. There is a hidden logic within the psyche that activates whenever an intense presence enters a room. This logic can't be read on faces. It's felt in the invisible field between bodies. Today, you're going to sharpen that sensitivity to understand why your mere presence shifts the dynamics around you. What are the signs that your energy is exceeding someone else's threshold? And how can you hold it without shrinking, without diluting yourself, without inflating? Because yes, there is a mature way to carry high inner voltage without burning anyone and without dimming your own light. Call energy, the flow of your attention, intention, and affection available in the present moment. It's the living current that moves your inner imagery, your imagination, your creative impulses, and your decisions. Wherever that current flows, something grows. Wherever you withdraw it, something cools. Others perceive this, even if they can't name it. They feel it in the density of your gaze, in the clarity with which you occupy your own space, in the harmony between your words and your gestures. They sense that within you there's a nucleus that doesn't negotiate its direction with the winds of approval. That nucleus does two things at once. It attracts and it provokes. It attracts what is ready to bloom, and it provokes what fears its own death. In other words, when you enter, their shadows enter too. That's why, if your energy is too strong, you'll notice reactions around you that seem exaggerated compared to what you actually said or did. That's the first sign. Emotional disproportionality in others. Pay attention to the micro-signals, thick silences after your interventions, jokes that aren't meant to be funny but to cut you down, unnecessary challenges, subtle sarcasm disguised as curiosity, sudden topic changes just when you touch something essential, avoidant eyes that later send long messages saying what they couldn't say face to face, little logistical coincidences that sabotage plans as if reality itself were conspiring to pull you back into the average. Don't take it personally. The psyche seeks homeostasis. A system accustomed to a certain level of intensity automatically resists when it encounters a higher gradient. It's self-protection. That resistance organizes itself into very clear patterns. The first is projection. Your most luminous traits, determination, clarity, serenity, work like mirrors, reflecting back to others what they have not yet recognized in themselves. Two modes appear: idealization and devaluation. Idealization puts you on a pedestal. Devaluation cuts you down until you fit their comfort zone. If you notice people switching rapidly between the two, it's not you who's changing. It's their inner images of you. The second pattern is the constellation of complexes. You say something neutral, yet it presses old emotional buttons and reactivates buried memories. You're not the cause, you're the trigger. The third pattern is transference. When you hold a stable internal axis, you awaken in others effective movements directed toward inner figures of authority, care, or challenge. They speak to you as if you were that inner ghost. The fourth pattern is enantiodromia. Where much light appears, its complementary shadow inevitably follows. If you radiate too much certainty, a fog of doubt may rise around you. If you show great strength, passive-aggressive gestures may appear nearby. It's the pendulum of psyche seeking balance. So how can you confirm that your energy is surpassing someone's threshold? There are three main signs. First, acceleration or paralysis. Some people, in your presence, start to speed up without reason. They talk too fast, overshare, make grand promises they can't keep. Others freeze, lose words, forget what they were about to say. Second, temporal distortion. You ask for something today, and they respond a month later. You ask for something a month ahead, and they want it now. Time bends around your presence because your intention reorganizes priorities. That reordering generates anxiety in those who live in constant postponement. Third, boundary friction. When your field feels dense, some will invade it to test you, while others will withdraw abruptly to avoid being influenced. Both reactions stem from the same phenomenon. They feel your center and want to know if it's real or just a pose. Now, pay attention. An intense presence isn't loud. It's steady. It doesn't shout, doesn't push, doesn't over-explain, doesn't need to convince. The human psyche senses stability the same way animals sense weather changes. True magnetism is not theatrical, it's internal coherence. But even coherence, when it contrasts too sharply with a world full of contradictions, generates dissonance. That dissonance is what you perceive as strange reactions. Don't avoid them and don't collect them. Use them as a thermometer. Here's the subtle mistake many make: confusing strong energy with ego inflation. Strong energy is rooted in a living center that listens and responds. Inflation is puffed up with fantasy and loses contact with the ground. How to distinguish them? Ask yourself, can I feel my body right now? My feet, my breath, my heartbeat? If you can inhabit that sensation while speaking, your strength is real. If you disconnect from your body and ride ideas of grandeur, your strength becomes foam, and foam always collapses. The psyche of others can smell the difference. With true power, people will follow you into unknown forests. With inflated power, they'll smile politely while waiting for you to burst. To avoid that trap, practice symbolic grounding. Before entering any space, pause for 3 full breaths. In the first, release the anxiety of being seen. In the second, release the need to control outcomes. In the third, let yourself remember that presence doesn't need to prove itself. It only needs to be. From that stillness, your energy becomes medicine instead of disruption. You stop being a storm that others fear and become the quiet fire that invites transformation. In the third step, affirm silently, I am here to serve what is real. This single intention redirects the flow of your energy from fantasy toward reality. Then, take a micro-action that aligns you with your center. Walk with steady rhythm. Look at the space before looking at people. When you stop, feel the entire sole of your foot resting on the ground, and let your spine align as if an invisible thread were pulling you upward from the crown of your head. People won't know why, but they'll feel it. Someone is present. When your energy becomes strong, it also awakens the collective shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is unrecognized power. What emerges then? Unnecessary competition, comparisons, whispers, subtle alliances. The shadow always looks for someone else to project what it refuses to see in itself. In those scenarios, avoid 3 reactions: compulsively justifying yourself, playing the game of proving superiority, or giving up your center out of fear of creating division. Justifying yourself ties you to someone else's judgment. Competing lowers your frequency. Abandoning your center makes you inconsistent. So what should you do? Name what's happening without drama and return to your purpose. You might say, I see this is creating tension. Then bring the focus back by saying, what matters here is this. That phrase, what matters here is this, brings the energy field back to purpose. You don't need to win, you need to protect the meaning. Another common effect of a heightened energy is imitation. People start to speak like you, use your words, your gestures, your rhythm. Don't take it as theft or flattery. It's psychic contagion. The psyche learns by resonance before it learns by concept. When you hold a certain frequency, others find in you a tuning fork. Use that with responsibility. Teach through example, not sermons. Do things in front of others with the same naturalness with which you breathe. Work, organize, decide, pay attention to detail. Strong energy educates through presence. To educate through presence also means enduring the frustration of others. When someone sees themselves reflected in your discipline, they might attack you. Do not defend yourself by attacking back. Show the path with a simple phrase. If you'd like, I can show you how I do it. Those who are ready will approach. Those who are not will find reasons to distance themselves. Both are good. Clarity also filters. Notice how time reacts when you enter a process. At first, you may face outer resistance, calls that don't go through, emails that vanish, objects that fall, meetings that are cancelled. It's not bad luck, it's realignment. Your intention has shifted the center of gravity, and everything is adjusting. Respond with consistency. Don't complain, don't dramatize, don't push harder. Do something small and concrete that keeps the direction alive. The small done repeatedly breaks inertia. The collective psyche eventually yields to the evidence of your persistence. Now, let's speak about the effects on close relationships when your energy grows intense. 3 movements often appear: Tests, demands, and confessions. Tests. They'll place absurd limits to see if you'll break. Don't compromise your integrity to pass an invented exam. Simply keep being clear and calm. Demands. They'll ask more of you than is fair, believing you can hold it all. Remember, strong energy is useless if it becomes servitude. Say no when it's no. Confessions. Truths will open before you. Things unsaid for years. Intensity is a magnet for what longs to come to light. Listen without rushing. Don't try to fix immediately. The spoken word itself is medicine. The urge to fix everything at once is often fear in disguise. You'll want to know how to soften your field without dimming it. It's not about being less. It's about being discerning. There are 3 regulators: intention, rhythm, and boundary. Intention. Decide clearly why you enter a space. When your why is clear, your energy organizes around it instead of scattering. Rhythm. Slow down your speech by 10% and soften your gaze by 10% when you notice anxiety around you. This subtle adjustment prevents other nervous systems from entering defense mode. Boundary. Imagine your skin as an intelligent, porous edge. You don't absorb what's not yours. You don't invade what hasn't been given. Visualize a clear line where your responsibility ends. This symbolic image trains your nervous system and, by resonance, educates others. There are outer signs that you are carrying your intensity well. Spaces become more ordered after you pass through. Conversations grow more direct. Problems are named with courage. Decisions, though painful, are made. Creativity awakens in others. If what you leave behind is clarity and motion, you're on the right path. If what you leave behind is fear and rigidity, recalibrate. Remember, it's not about being admired, it's about helping reality bloom. A strong presence tends to activate synchronicities, pieces that suddenly fit, people who call just as you make an inner decision, repeated signs confirming your direction. The energy organized within you organizes everything around you. Don't turn this into superstition. Use it as an additional compass, not a replacement for judgment. Note what repeats 3 times in a short period. Ask yourself, what is this repetition asking of me? Then take a small action. The psyche responds to concrete gestures more than to abstract enthusiasm. If you sense unjustified hostility, remember this key. The attack speaks about the attacker, but it also reveals your effect. Instead of engaging, practice symbolic hygiene. Walk for 10 minutes, feeling your feet. Write down everything that was thrown at you and safely burn it or tear it into pieces. Breathe in longer than you exhale to reignite your presence from the body. Symbolic hygiene is not magic. It's pedagogy for the nervous system. It brings you back to your center and prevents you from reacting from the wound. People will tell you to tone it down, to be less intense. What they're really asking is that you don't make them look at themselves. Don't obey blindly. Adjust your delivery, but don't hide your fire. The world doesn't need tamed voices. It needs stable fields. When you hold your energy with humility, you invite others to do the same. Humility here doesn't mean shrinking. It means remembering that your strength was given to serve something greater than your name. When you channel your current toward a craft, a well-done job, a true relationship, or an idea that makes life better, the collective psyche makes room for you. Not immediately, it tests you first, but to the one who perseveres, it grants more trust. Practice this protocol before entering any important meeting. First, arrive 1 minute early and take in the entire space as if it were a landscape. Observe the walls, the lights, the surfaces. Name them silently in your mind. This simple act grounds you and calms the nervous system. Second, align your breathing with the pace you want the conversation to have. If you breathe slowly, the energy in the room slows down with you. If you rush, the room rushes too. Third, when you speak, let 2 words be supported by your body, one at the beginning to set direction, and one at the end to seal what has been said with presence. Fourth, when you listen, shift your gaze away from the other person for just a second. Let it rest on a neutral point in the room. That tiny pause keeps you from merging with their emotions and gives you time to think. Fifth, summarize what you've truly heard. Doing so clears the emotional field and lowers defenses. Sixth, ask a question that invites action, not just opinion. Something like, what's the first concrete step we'll take today? Seventh, close your participation with a phrase of purpose, something that realigns the group. What we're really looking for is that small gesture gathers scattered energy into focus. And when you bring deep authenticity into your interactions, there may come a paradox. The more real you are, the more alone you may feel at times. Not because others fail to understand you, but because the path of individuation requires long stretches of silence. Don't rush to fill them with noise. In those moments, cultivate your inner world. Write down your dreams as soon as you wake up. Notice recurring symbols, rivers, houses, mountains, doors. These images are the language of the unconscious. When you start a dialogue with that deeper layer, your energy becomes rounder, softer, more adaptable. A round edge enters any space more easily than a sharp one. Learn to read the temperature of a group before you speak. There are cold groups that need warmth, a brief story that awakens meaning. There are hot groups that need containment, structure, clarity, and calm. When you bring what's missing, your energy is not felt as excess, but as medicine. And if someone still reacts with resistance, thank them inwardly. They've just revealed a place where your presence isn't meant to enter. A closed door saves you effort and returns your time. There's a decisive practice that transforms your impact. After every encounter, ask yourself, what stayed alive here? It could be an idea, a gesture, a commitment, a feeling. If nothing remained alive, your intensity dissolved into performance. But if something, however small, stayed alive, then your energy took form. The next day, nourish that form with one small action. True magnetism is built through loyalty to what's alive, not through spectacle. When you sustain elevated energy for weeks, a beautiful phenomenon unfolds. The environment begins to adjust to you. People stop testing your limits because they've learned that you won't leave your center. They relax. They sense that your intensity isn't a knife, it's a lamp. And in that moment, be generous. Share your method, your language, your opportunities. If you use your voltage only to shine alone, the field around you becomes hostile. But if you use it to illuminate, the field holds you. Remember the ecology of your energy. You cannot be at full voltage all day. The current needs rhythm, deep work and deep rest, meaningful conversation and nourishing silence, public presence and private retreat. Without rhythm, voltage becomes noise. With rhythm, it becomes music. Write down your sacred hours, times when no one can interrupt you, even if they try. You don't need to justify them. You need to protect them. Those who don't guard their rhythms end up relying on applause to feel alive. Those who do exist even when no one is watching. If right now you feel that your energy is overflowing, Try this integration exercise. Sit with your spine straight. Bring your awareness to the base of your spine. Imagine a gentle weight sinking into the ground. Inhale to the count of 4. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. Repeat 5 times. Then ask yourself, what intention is guiding my day? Write it in one short phrase. Everything you do today will be a channel for that phrase. If something doesn't fit it, it's not for today. You'll notice how chaos starts to organize itself. Reactions around you soften, not because you've dimmed, but because your current no longer spills everywhere. And remember this, strong energy calls for responsibility. You're not here to impress, you're here to imprint. Real marks on the world. Work well done. Words that support. Decisions that heal. Every time you cross a doorway, remember that you carry a field with you. Your silence carries weight. Your gestures carry weight. Your gaze carries weight. Weigh them with love. If there's noise around you, confusion, sarcasm, distraction, be the metronome. If there's fear, be the breath that enters. If there's inertia, be the first movement. How others react to your intensity is not your main task. It's simply information. Your real task is to guard your center and place it in service of what truly matters. When you do this, the world around you, people, projects, paths, begins to move in a new rhythm. And without any announcement, things that once seemed impossible start to happen. The conversation that never took place, the decision that never arrived, the movement everyone was waiting for, suddenly unfolds, and you realize that the person they were waiting for was you. Not because you shouted, but because you held steady. And when you hold steady, reality recognizes you and begins to cooperate. Then you understand that your energy was never too strong. It was simply asking for a larger container. And you are building that container right now, with every breath you take, every word you anchor, every boundary you honor, and every simple act that makes the world around you more alive, more ordered, and more human. If this message resonated with you, take a deep breath and remember, every word you've heard is an invitation to embody your own center. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next step on this path of awareness and presence. And always remember, the world doesn't change when you speak louder. It changes when your silence has weight. I'm going to tell you an uncomfortable truth, one that perhaps no one has ever dared to put right in front of you. As long as you search for love with desperation, love will flee from you with the same desperation. It isn't because the universe is cruel, but because whatever you chase with hunger is translated by your psyche as lack, and lack is always registered as danger. Picture this for a moment. You step into a silent room, you close the door, and for the first time in a long while, you don't carry your phone with you. There is no music, no notifications, no promises of tomorrow, just you and the sound of your own breathing. At first, it feels unbearable. After a minute, your body begs you to open the door, to call someone, to send a quick "I'm fine" message just to feel connected. But if you resist, if you allow yourself to endure that first wave of restlessness, you begin to hear something faint, almost like a soft crackling sound coming from behind the walls. That sound is your soul stretching awake, and this is where the real work begins. Learning to be alone is not a punishment. It is the hidden passage toward what Carl Jung called individuation, the intimate journey back to your own center. And here is the twist no one ever told you. When you start walking toward yourself, love begins to walk towards you too. The solitude I am speaking about is not the same as the gnawing emptiness that bites at you in the middle of the night when you stare at the ceiling, wondering if anyone truly knows who you are. That is abandonment. Transformative solitude has a different temperature. It is like a warm and serious room without decorations, where you sit down face to face with the eyes of who you are and who you have been. Jung said that what we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate. How many times have you mistaken fate for a repeated pattern? You live the same story with different names. You fall in love with the same archetype disguised in new clothing. The rescuer, the pursuer, the distant one, the unreachable one. You tell yourself, this time it will be different. But inside, you carry the same script, and the script dictates the story. When you sit with yourself in honesty, the script becomes audible. You hear the ancient voices of maternal or paternal complexes whispering, be excessively good so they won't abandon you. Keep your distance so you won't be trapped. Prove your worth or you will be discarded. Those sentences were not born with you, but they live within you. They operate as invisible filters, turning your dates into exams, your silences into threats, your gestures into arguments with ghosts. And because you cannot see them, you project them outward. You project onto him, onto her, your need to be saved, admired, chosen. Those who carry the weight of your projection can feel it. Some stay for a while, but eventually they leave, because no one can carry for long what your own soul refuses to hold. Here lies one of Jung's most uncomfortable truths. You do not fall in love with the person standing before you, but with the image of your own inner world. You create a figure, anima or animus, and paste it over their real face. You see light where there are shadows, and later you blame shadows in places where there was also light. But when you learn to be alone, you begin to carefully remove those projections, like peeling a photograph away from glass. You discover that part of what you called love was hunger, and another part was fear. And when you see that clearly, something inside you regains dignity. You stop asking another person to complete you as if you were a broken vessel, and instead you begin to see yourself as the craftsman who repairs with gold the cracks of your own being. Do you know the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is mended with golden seams? To release the desperate chase for love does not make you cynical, it makes you an artisan of your own soul. Each crack you touch in solitude becomes a golden thread that holds you together. If what I am saying is resonating in the deepest part of you, stay with me, because what comes next may change the way you understand yourself. Imagine now that you are dreaming. You walk through a forest and find an old house. From the outside, it looks abandoned. You push the door, it creaks. The smell is of wood and ancient rain. You light candles as you move from room to room. In the last room, there is a single chair in front of a fogged mirror. You wipe the mirror, and instead of seeing your reflection, you see the faces of every person you ever chased with desperation. Each face is holding silently something that once belonged to you. Your expectations, your fear of solitude, your hunger to be validated. And you realize you never truly asked them for love. You asked them to do a job that was always yours. That house is the house of the soul. Dreams speak in symbols because direct language frightens our defenses, and Jung trusted this symbolic grammar. Conscious solitude is, in many ways, the act of living inside that house with the lights turned on. You don't drive anyone away, but you do take back the weight you had placed on them. It is both simple and fierce. There is a kind of alchemy that begins the moment you choose to be alone. The first stage is the nigredo, the blackening, where everything old begins to decompose. You feel clumsy, sad, even bored. It is the I don't know who I am if I am not chasing. It is the what do I do with my hands if I am not writing and rewriting messages. Allow the nigredo. In that heat, the lead of old habits softens. After that comes a quiet clarity, the albedo, the whitening. It is not euphoria, it is cleansing. Spaces that used to be filled with urgencies now become open. At first, the emptiness terrifies you, but then you baptize it as space. Space to read a symbol, to listen to your breathing, to ask yourself with respect, what is my life truly asking of me beyond the need to be chosen by someone else? And if you remain long enough, the rubedo arrives, the reddening, the stage of passion that no longer seeks to devour, but to give. And when you begin to give from that place, something strange happens. Your very presence begins to have weight. It becomes like gravity, and gravity does not chase, it attracts. If this truth is opening a new space in your mind, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not for me, but for you. Because teaching something you are beginning to embody carves it deeper into your own flesh, and it is through embodiment that wisdom becomes real. I want you to picture concrete scenes. Someone used to stay up late, checking who had viewed their stories. They uploaded pictures not out of joy, but out of strategy. If they see that I'm fine, they will come back. That sentence felt like a pin pressed into the chest. One night, they chose to do something radical. They turned off the screen at 10, left the phone in another room, and sat on the floor, back straight, hands resting on the legs. 10 minutes, not to meditate perfectly, but simply not to listen. Silent tears came, not out of sadness, but out of abstinence. In that small daily renunciation, an old voice began to surface. If no one looks at you, you don't exist. It was the child who learned to smile as currency, who tried never to upset anyone. The adult spoke to that child. Yes, they whispered softly, the way you speak to a frightened animal. I am here. I see you, even if no one else does. 2 weeks later, they posted things, just because. A month later, they left a message unanswered, not as a strategy, but because they were cooking, and the source needed attention. Attention finally returned to its rightful place, and as if the world sensed it, new gazes appeared. Not more, but better. Not because the universe rewards, but because energy that does not beg shines differently. Another person lived with the pursuer's pattern, calling twice, 3 times, always justifying. I insist because I care. That insistence was only fear of being invisible. In inner work, an image arose, a dog barking inside an empty house. So much noise, but no one within. A symbolic experiment was suggested. Place a chair in front of you and sit on the other. Imagine the part of you that insists is sitting there. Ask it what it fears. If I don't chase, they forget me. And who forgot you first? Silence followed, long and heavy. Memories surfaced of a moment when someone important never arrived, when presence was promised and never given. That echo lived behind every constant message sent in panic. It wasn't about stopping communication. It was about writing from a different inner room. Gradually, time was allowed its time. A miracle, not rhythm, but the rhythm of someone no longer chasing behind a closed door. One day came gratitude from the other side. Thank you for not pressuring me. You give me peace. Reading it brought a smile. There was no strategy, there was presence, and presence, again and again, attracts. Another story spoke of confusion between tenderness and fusion, the fear that if I'm not attached, I'll be lost. The training began in solitude, walking without music at dusk for half an hour, observing the trees as if they were ancient. Nature is a silent therapist. It teaches the correct distance between things. No tree pushes another to grow. None begs for light. They search for their place, root deeply, and wait for rain without pleading. Roots began to be placed at home too. A plant, a warm lamp, a notebook. At the end of the day, one sentence was written: "Today, I did not betray myself." Sometimes it was small. I said no, even though I trembled. Sometimes it was immense. I didn't return to someone who loved me halfway. What sustained the change was not an idea. Ideas vanish like mist. It was rituals. Rituals gave shape to a new identity. Something subtler happens when you choose solitude. The world begins to speak in synchronicities. They are not magical signs to save you from the effort. They are winks confirming the path. You think of reaching out to someone, and instead of doing so, you breathe. Hours later, that person writes. It is not witchcraft, but meaningful coincidence. The psyche and the world share the same background, and when your noise quiets, you hear the shared music. You no longer use synchronicities as crutches to feed old hunger. You receive them as bells that say, "Keep going." That's where the difference lies. One way of needing uses symbols to escape emptiness. The other uses symbols to sustain oneself within. The first makes you lose yourself. The second helps you find yourself. Let's touch a delicate corner. The fear that if I stop searching, no one will come. That fear is logical. If early experience taught you, if I don't cry out, no one hears me. But you are no longer that child. And here the psyche is generous. It allows you to rewrite not the past itself, but the bond you now hold with that past. Just as the body learns new movements, the soul learns new postures. The posture of someone who rests in themselves is not arrogant, but humble as a mountain. Jung did not propose an inflated self, but a self inclined toward the deeper self, that totality that exceeds you and sustains you at the same time. When you align with that current, a physical phenomenon occurs. You begin to occupy your rightful place. In a room, you no longer shrink nor overexpand. You look into eyes without invading, listen without vanishing. Curiously, that is seductive. It is because it transmits something rare, quiet security. The kind of security that does not promise, "I will never leave you," but instead promises, "I will not leave myself." Whoever hears this, even without words, feels it in the body, and the body trusts. If you're still here, it means you're not like the rest, and you're ready to go further. Not because you're special on social media, but because you chose to stay in a place where many would have left. And what happens in concrete terms when you learn to be alone and stop chasing love desperately? What happens is that your energy stops vibrating like a question and begins vibrating like an answer. Before, you were a walking interrogation. Am I enough? Will I be chosen? Now you embody silent affirmations. I can sustain myself. I can choose. That doesn't mean overwhelming others with your self-sufficiency. It means being kind with your desire, not enslaved by it. You begin to speak with clarity. I like you. I'm not in a rush. You begin to say no before entangling yourself, before cutting ties abruptly. You start feeling your body as an ally. If something in you shrinks each time that person appears, that contraction becomes information, not condemnation. Trained solitude awakens sensitivity. I want to give you a Jungian practice that doesn't sound modern, but works with surgical precision. Active imagination. It's not fantasy, but dialogue with the inner figures inhabiting you. If every time someone delays in responding, a part of you panics, give it a face, seat it before you. Ask not, why do you do this? But what are you trying to protect? Listen. Then introduce another figure. Your present adult, the one who knows how to cook, pay bills, and stop before humiliating. Ask that adult to speak. Allow the dialogue to last as long as needed. At the end, breathe and write 3 sentences. What did I learn? What do I promise? And what do I stop promising? This repeated scene changes the architecture of desire, from begging into meeting. Another practice, silence vigil. 15 minutes daily without stimuli. Sitting, eyes open, not to meditate perfectly, but to tolerate your heartbeat without anesthetics. The psyche confuses emptiness with danger only until you inhabit it. Once you do, you discover it was space, and space broadens the gaze. Where once you saw only, either I'm chosen or I'm lost, now middle paths emerge. You can meet someone without pausing your life. You can enjoy interest without mortgaging your dignity. You can step back on time without turning it into tragedy. That is emotional maturity, and few things are more attractive than someone who knows and cares for themselves. Feel this in your skin. Stopping the desperate search doesn't mean turning to stone. It doesn't make you unreachable. It makes you clear. Clarity opens and closes doors without noise. If someone writes at 3 in the morning, you answer when your morning begins. Not because you're playing, but because you sleep well. If someone shows up only when lonely, you notice it without rage. You set boundaries that take the shape of self-love. Today, I can't. I'd rather meet another day. What you propose doesn't align with me. Speaking like this doesn't scare away those who matter. It calls them in. It calls those who vibrate with the rhythm of reciprocity. And with time, something deeper unfolds. You become interesting to yourself. You discover passions you didn't know existed because you were always too busy chasing. Books appear that pierce through you, walks that cleanse you, projects that awaken something burning in your chest. Life is no longer a waiting room for love. It becomes a journey. And when love arrives, because it does not come as a machine that keeps you breathing. It sits beside you as a fellow traveler. You no longer say, I need you to live. You say, how beautiful it is that you are here. And that phrase carries a fragrance the other instantly recognizes. Freedom with commitment. Commitment without chains. That combination is rare, and that is why it draws people in. Maybe you ask yourself, what if it never comes? That never is a monster living in the hallway of fear. It makes you believe that if you do not accept crumbs, you will be left without bread. But trained solitude teaches you how to bake. And when you learn how to bake, the table never remains empty. It is filled in different ways. Sometimes with romantic love, sometimes with deep friendships, sometimes with a work that outlives you. And in all those cases, you are not alone, because real loneliness is not the absence of others. It is the absence of yourself in your own life. If you are present, then you are no longer alone. Let me return to the forest for a moment. You come back to the house. This time, you bring flowers and a warm cup in your hands. You sit in front of the mirror, and now, finally, you see yourself. Not the exhausted mask, not the persona you built to survive, but something deeper. You do not applaud yourself or condemn yourself. You simply hold your own gaze. You whisper, I return to myself. That tiny act shifts the entire map. You walk to the door, and as you step outside, you hear footsteps. You did not chase them. They arrived. Now listen to this with tenderness, but without anesthesia. If after all of this, you feel your body telling you to run, then run inward. Run to a piece of paper and write down the 3 relationships where you lost yourself the most. Search for the pattern, give it a name: the pursuer, the mother, the weary hero. Thank them for what they taught you, return what was never yours, and make yourself a simple promise, the kind you can actually keep. I will not abandon myself for love. Signing it softly in front of a candle is enough. The psyche respects rituals, and listen carefully to the small reminders I asked you to keep close as you walk through this stage. If this is resonating deep within you, stay, because what comes next might change how you understand yourself. If this truth is opening a new space in your mind, share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you are still here, it means you are not like the rest. You are ready to go further. These are not phrases meant for decoration. They are keys. Use them when fear tries to drag you back into the old ways. Before closing, let me give you one last frame, one that, if you let it enter, will remain with you for a very long time. Love is not something you chase, it is something you summon. How? With a life worth sharing. Conscious solitude does not isolate you, it tunes you. You refine your instrument until your music no longer sounds like pleading, but like a song. And those who vibrate with that melody arrive without you having to shout. And if no one arrives today, the music does not vanish. It continues, and in that steady flow, in that quiet continuity, you become magnetic, not because you want to attract, but because you radiate. If you have felt the pull of this conversation, do something tangible right now to seal this movement. Turn off your phone half an hour before sleeping. Sit on the floor, breathe, and ask yourself, what do I need from me that I have been looking for outside? Write down the first answer, even if it hurts, and take the smallest step possible today in that direction. No heroics, just soft constancy. That is the lever that moves worlds. I want to end as I began, but with another melody. The day you learn to be alone does not become grey. It becomes whole. You do not lose love. You stop losing yourself in its name. And from that place, when someone looks at you, they will not see a hungry pit. They will see a calm lake, alive, deep. Those who have learned how to look will stay. Those still running will continue their race. Meanwhile, you will have found something greater than a partner. You will have found your axis, and that axis is never bargained with. It is honored. If you wish to keep refining this presence that does not beg, that draws others simply by being grounded, then nurture it. Every time you choose to feed yourself with words, thoughts, and content that elevate you, you also choose the version of yourself that refuses to settle for half-loves. And without even realizing it, that makes you irresistibly fully you.